Howdy y'all, Christi here with Little Salty Homesteader. Welcome back to my YouTube channel and welcome to my garden. Today I'm going to be talking about cover crops, what they are, why you use them, and where I am going to be planting some cover crops today. So this is obviously for your home garden. If you are like a large scale farmer or you raise cattle or anything like that, you can still use cover crops, but I'm speaking specifically about planting them within your small, like backyard type gardens. By definition, cover crops are plants used primarily to slow erosion, improve soil health, enhance water availability, smother weeds, help control pests and diseases, add organic matter to the soil, increase crop diversity, and attract pollinators. While not typically grown as a food source, many cover crops are edible, which could also boost your food stores in a pinch. So if you grew some of the edible cover crop types to improve the soil health or what have you, you could harvest those crops for your food stores as well. So it'd be kind of a dual purpose crop at that point. Cover crops can be used anytime you do not have your plants planted in a space. Think winter, summer, if you're doing like a rest period between the spring and fall plantings, spring before you do your summer planting, fall before you do any type of, fall into winter as you're resting your garden for the next spring planting. The most recognizable benefit of planting cover crops, especially in your in-ground gardens, is to slow or prevent erosion. The plant roots help hold soil in place. Cover crops can also be used to improve soil health. Plants like crimson clover and beans are nitrogen fixing, while plants like mustard greens and radishes break up and aerate heavy soils with their deep tap roots. You can also plant a cocktail of cover crops or a mix of different types to achieve multiple benefits at once. By combining many types of cover crops together, you can increase, sorry, my allergies are really bad, so my whole face is itching. Okay. By combining many types of cover crops, you can increase organic matter and nitrogen, provide ground cover, improve weed control, and attract more beneficial insects and pollinators. It can be more difficult to manage a mixed variety of cover crops, but understanding each crop type can help you manage that space easier. Example, if you're going to plant out crimson clover with radishes or mustard greens, obviously they're going to provide two different sets of benefits to your garden space, but they also have different care requirements. Crimson clover is nitrogen fixing, and it is pretty cold weather hardy and doesn't require a whole lot in order to come to fruition. Radishes also don't require a whole heck of a lot to come to fruition. Those roots are going to dig down into the soil to kind of help break it up a little bit. So those two would actually work really well to be planted together, but something like beans and radishes might be a little bit more difficult to try to work through, but understanding how to grow each type will help you manage growing them both together. I have a small in-ground bed here, which that's where we're at here in the garden, in my backyard with relatively poor soil. This area of North Texas is known for having heavy clay that makes it difficult to have a thriving garden. It also has water runoff when there are heavy rains because the patio here has a very, very, very slight slope. So whenever it rains really heavily, the water runs off of the edge of the patio and through this flower bed. And sometimes if the water comes through too quickly, it will take off the top layer of soil with it out into the yard. So my yard, the grass is really super green even here in late August because it's had all this soil that I've been working so hard on come out into the yard and kind of help that soil get improved. Adding the cedar mulch this year helped a ton to slow down that erosion, but also having the soil covered with plants, those roots kind of anchoring that soil there, is going to help a whole lot more. So some examples of cover crops that you can plant include mustard greens, alfalfa, ryegrass, clover, buckwheat, cowpeas, radishes, vetch, other types of grasses like oats, and then legumes like your bush beans. When planting cover crops, you will want to plant thickly so weeds will not be able to compete. Cut the crops at the soil level in the spring to use as a green manure, which will provide organic matter and nutrients back to the soil. You can just simply do that chop and drop method, or you can turn it into the soil to break down, which of course will add those nutrients and a little bit of aeration. So for my flower bed here, this Hot Mess Express, I'm going to be planting, I'm going to kind of show you guys images of the things that I'm going to be planting here. I'm going to be planting crimson clover. Let me find the other ones. Talking buckwheat, and the seeds for this are very, very tiny. Very tiny. I can barely feel them in this envelope, but isn't it really cute? Anyway, buckwheat. I have two types of mustard greens that I'm going to be planting in here. I have this red one, and then I have a regular brown mustard. I'm also going to be planting several varieties of bush beans. And then lastly, I'm going to plant some daikon radish in here. Now, I do not expect my daikon radish to reach this size, but because they are bigger than your traditional, you know, like French breakfast radish or like the cherry bells, they should help break up the soil a little bit more. While not intentionally planting for food, the beans, greens, and radishes are edible, and I could harvest if I wanted to. The buckwheat and bush beans are warm season crops, so once the first frost comes around, November 15th-ish, those will die off. The remaining three are frost tolerant and will provide cover crop benefits through the winter. The clover will bloom in early spring, which will provide an early pollen source for beneficial insects and pollinators. The clover and beans will provide nitrogen and green manure, while the mustard greens and radishes will help break up the heavy clay soil. Buckwheat helps improve soil health and smother common weeds, and the flowers on that buckwheat also help feed pollinators, and it grows well in poor soil, which is great because that's what I have here. My flower bed currently has several annual and perennial flowers, so I'll be interplanting in the empty spaces. Many of the seeds are quite small, so I'll need to move the cedar mulch to get the seeds planted. Once they germinate, then I'll move the mulch back around to kind of protect those young seedlings, and I'll need to make sure that I keep this soil nice and moist until everything has germinated. The space will seem chaotic and wild with seemingly no organization, kind of like it does now, but a little bit worse. But the goal is decreased weeds, increased soil health, and a biodiverse space for beneficial insects and pollinators. So while this space is pretty heavily planted with a lot of flowers, I do have nutsedge that is sporadically growing through here. The problem was much, much worse, but I have been working pretty diligently all year to kind of pull it as I see it and more intensely plant this flower bed out with more flowers and things. So I don't actually see any over here, but I know that there's some down at that end. So my goal with, one of my goals with the cover crops is to help prevent those weeds from coming back in the spring once the winter frost kind of kills them off, if it even kills nutsedge. Otherwise, I want to so intensely plant it so thickly that there's no room for those weeds to poke through. You can also use cover crops in raised beds and containers for increasing soil health, so their use is not limited to just in-ground spaces. Basically, anywhere where you are letting your planting space kind of have a break, it's a good idea to put a cover crop over it to keep the soil microorganisms active and also put some soil nutrients back in the soil. I'm just keeping my raised beds and containers planted out with foods and herbs. So right now I'm not focusing my cover crops in those areas. I'm just focusing them in this in-ground space right here. What about y'all? Do you guys utilize any sort of cover crops? And if so, what do you grow as a cover crop? And do you also consider it an edible food source, or are you only growing it as the benefit for your growing space? All right, so I'm just gonna clear a little space here and kind of show you guys how I'm getting the cover crops planted within the ground. Like I said, there's several different varieties that are going to be pretty intensely planted through here. Pretty much if I have a space for it, then I'm going to put plants in it and hopefully, or I'm going to put a seed in it and hopefully something germinates and we get some nice cover crop activity happening. But let me find an empty space to start planting in and we'll get going. Okay, so this area here does have the space available for cover crop planting, and I actually do see a couple of like volunteer plants and I'm unsure if they're weeds or not, so I'm gonna go ahead and pull those. And we have some zinnias that are kind of growing in all directions here, so kind of try to move those around a bit. And okay, so we're left with this space right here, and so let me grab my tools. What I'm looking for is this guy. All right, so I'm just gonna move the mulch out of the way. So you can see where some of that cedar mulch has started to break down, and it is contributing to an overall healthier soil structure. But there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in this space. So hopefully the cover crops will help with that. And I did plant cover crops in here 2 years ago, and it did improve things a lot. So hope for a repeat of that. Okay, so we have that space pretty much cleared out of all of the big chunks of mulch. So crimson clover, this says 1/4 to 1/2 inch deep. It's kind of what the seeds look like for that, and I'm just gonna kind of chaos sow a lot of this stuff in. The beans I will actually plant directly into the soil, but everything else is just gonna kind of get chaos sown. Okay, here's the radish seeds. They're a little bit bigger than other radish seeds that I've seen because these are a much bigger radish. So I'm just gonna make a few divots here around, probably 4. Get some seeds put in there. The seed packet says 1/4 inch deep for these, so. I don't have much on the buckwheat, if I have anything. All right. Alright, that was the Japanese red mustard, and now I am going to come in with the brown mustard. And I just sprinkled a few seeds of that. And then now I'm just gonna plant some of the beans into here. We got, make sure I'm planting that eyes up. That. Again, I'm planting bush varieties of beans. You could do vining types, but you need to make sure that you provide trellising for them. So just keep that in mind. This is one of the times that the bush varieties of beans would be much better suited for your planting space. Okay, so all I need to do now is water the space in really, really well. Make sure that the soil stays moist over the next few days, and then, or until, you know, stuff germinates pretty well, and then kind of just let those cover crops do their job. All right, so this one section here was basically the footprint that I'm going to follow to get cover crops planted throughout the entirety of this in-ground flower bed. And hopefully we will get lots of good benefits from it through the fall and winter into spring. All of those that I listed earlier, feeding the pollinators, soil health, nitrogen, all of those different things. But that's all I have for you guys today for this video. If you liked this pretty informational, hopefully educational content, please like and subscribe and do all those different YouTube-y things. But until next time, go find a way to get those garden manicures. Bye!